What's going on? I'm Tori Kravitz, joined by my fabulous, wonderful, amazing co-host, Alicia, too. Welcome to another episode of She's with the Band. How are you doing this week, Alicia?
Whew, you got me blushing, girl. I'm happy to be here. As I always say, the week has been crazy busy. We've obviously been filming so much. Been packing for a couple upcoming trips because I'm one of those weirdos who packs like 5 days before even leaving the house. Are you the same? Dude, us traveling together, we're gonna be a force. We have the same wavelength on that front.
Dude, when I go to England, I pack my suitcase like a month in advance. And I'll just like leave my suitcase out and throw things in over
Me
like a week or two. So I
This
feel
is
you.
wild. Okay, I love hearing this. How are you? How are things going?
Good. I'm excited we have a travel podcast now. That's great. No, just kidding. No, it's all good, man. Just been diving into lots of new music per usual. And just excited for another day, another episode with you.
Yes.
You
Oh,
know?
I'm so glad that you talked about or mentioned music rather, because I've actually been looking at concerts now that I moved from Toronto to the Montreal area because I'm nowhere near familiar with the venues around me
Oh
anymore. And
no.
that's such a shift because I feel like I knew Toronto like the back of my hand when it came to concert halls, or I'd just walk in and like every security guard would be like, "What's up, Alicia?" And they just knew I had an interview, you know? So it's very different. I'm learning the landscape and where everything is, but I might be seeing Bayside in a couple of weeks. That would be really dope.
Fun.
Dune Rats are in town soon. And I am obsessed with them. So just in terms of like who we're spinning lately, straight up stoner rock from Australia. They're amazing. Their song Scott Green is one of my all-time favorites, a very thrashy, upbeat earworm, where they just sing over and over like at a party, who's Scott Green? And I think it's so clever. Like that just it's so cheeky. I love it. So yeah, that's kind of my little
Oh,
world right
good.
now in terms of music. What are you doing? What are you
Yeah.
listening to?
Dude, I just need to say first that I think it's so funny how like everyone at the venues knew you and knew you were there for an interview because when this was back when I had my YouTube channel and my mom and I would be together doing interviews and we always had a Pelican case with my camcorder, the microphones, everything. And I didn't even realize until years and years later that we had become known as like the mother-daughter duo with the Pelican outside of venues. And I didn't realize how much people like noticed that it was a thing, and I think
Yes.
everyone probably wondered like what I was doing there, going backstage all the time, and just I could see how from the outside that was very bizarre, but yeah, just similar scenario in different cities, really, isn't it?
That it's so strange too because it was just reversed for me as my dad and I always had that like I would carry my stuff actually, you know, those shopping bags that like 80-year-olds will use to carry around, they roll those little roller bags. I would use one of those, dude, and so instead of groceries I had all my gear in there. So I remember just strolling into the venues and then being like, "Oh, what's up, it's the daughter son father team coming in to interview some more badass bands, like what's the dynamic, this is so cool," or they'd just be like, "You again?" But they'd always know it was us. So yeah,
Right.
very very similar.
Yeah, it was crazy. I went to the House of Blues in Orlando maybe a few months ago, and I recognized one of the same security guards that was there when I was like 15, because I don't go to House of Blues that often anymore. I was like, I can't believe this guy still works at this venue. But yeah,
Wow,
lo and
crazy.
behold. But back on topic, as far as music I've been enjoying, I actually have to credit Corey Westbrook for this discovery that I made over the weekend. Because I was looking through some of her old articles for her roulette series, which is on
Oh,
notfest.com,
Bandcamp Roulette, yeah,
Bandcamp
yeah.
Roulette. And I found a band called Might. I think they might be German. Don't quote me on that. Just check their Bandcamp if you want certainty. But a band called Might. They have an album called Abyss, which is so sick. There is a girl in the band, so staying on brand. And also staying on brand, it's like a doom, doom shoegaze.
Stop right
Yep.
now.
Nope. Sorry, guys. It is. But it's actually like super experimental. There are some songs that sound very shoegazy and like almost pop punky with like the kind of beat that's in there, and then other songs are really, really heavy. And I love albums like that where it's not just in your face the entire time. Like give me a break somewhere in there. So I think this album's like just really well balanced and cool. And they have like 1,000 monthly listeners or something, very tiny band. So I like being able to discover like these unknown gems and be like, go listen to them, do it.
Oh, that's awesome. I saw them in your story a few days back, and I thought to
Yeah.
myself, I'm going to get on that bandwagon. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, there you go. I'll put it in our playlist for you. And the artwork is
Oh,
really sick too.
okay, cool. I'm a sucker for artwork. Like that was one of my favorite things growing up because my parents, especially my dad, had this crazy vinyl collection. And I've always been more of a digital listener when it comes to music because I just love mixing up singles or having like 20 bands go throughout the day. But I'll never forget sitting in the basement with my sister, just pulling off records off the shelf, admiring all of the covers, especially the metal ones, because we were so confused with the fonts. When we'd listen, be like, oh yeah, that's a so-and-so song or a Judas Priest song or whatever. But it was pretty funny to me.
Oh man, I've been kind of mulling over the last few days how um sometimes, well, not sometimes, when I was younger, before iTunes existed and MP3s were really a thing, how you would have to go to a record store and pick an album literally based on the artwork. Yeah. And it was like a total gamble. And I actually went to a record store last month and they have like a random grab bag. It was like $5 for 10 CDs. And I was
That's
like,
cute.
what a steal. And it's like, you don't know what you're going to get in it. Just take it. And so I bought one. And everything was like super old, dude, like 50s, 40s music. And I was like, oh, I was expecting like some sick metal albums. Oops. Adjust your expectations on this mystery grab bag of CDs the record stores just try to get rid of.
Yeah.
But who knows? Maybe I'll find something cool and I'll bring it next week.
That's hilarious. It reminds me of when I used to go to there's a store, I don't know if you guys have in the States, but called Ardene's, and they'd have these little grab bags where they'd throw in like all these little things, and for $5 you get the bag. And I remember getting them as a kid because my parents would always just like sink in and be like, fine, you can get the stupid bag. And I'd open it and just be like the crappiest stuff the store was literally trying to get off the shelves. So been there, done that. It's disappointing, but I hope one day these bags come through for us.
Thank you. It was definitely a rookie move on my end for me to think that I was going to get like something really sick and modern in there. But you live and you learn. And honestly, like I kind of enjoy the adventure. I will pop these CDs into my car and see what they sound like. I don't know that it's particularly my cup of tea, but I'll never say never.
Okay, I can't wait to hear some suggestions. Or maybe when I see you, we can put one in and we can just both enjoy the beautiful sounds of the 40s. I cannot wait.
Yes. Well, you know who is my cup of tea though?
Oh, I do actually.
To serve.
Yes.
Employed to serve. Let's go.
And Justine Jones. I mean, the vocalist, of course, for Employed to Serve. They have so much going on right now. New record, Conjuring is officially out, hitting the road with Gojira. They have like 2 of that tour throughout the winter time. So that's just a massive get. And we know how much of a fan Justine's always been of Gojira. So that's like a dream tour, dude.
I know. I mean, they are so sick. Actually, I say that, but like I've never actually been able to see Gojira live. The one time they were playing a festival I was at, I only heard them from the parking lot and I stopped in my tracks and I was like, they sound amazing. So I'm living vicariously through Justine at the moment.
Yeah, she's such a cool, unique person because she's so down to earth and such a sweet human being off stage who turns into this absolutely monstrous force once she hits the stage. And it's such a powerful dynamic, which obviously makes someone such a dynamic human. So she actually fell into being in a band in such a bizarre, interesting way, which we'll obviously get into once we kick things off with her. But really cool story, cool person, great music, and I think she's gonna have a lot to say.
Yeah, and also such a great example because also running a record label, I mean, what a boss lady move as well. So that's another part I really want to talk to her about because to me, like, having a record label seems so far-fetched. I have no idea how that world really works. And I know that there's like certain taboos with record labels and things like that, but I feel like Justine is just all around like such a great person to talk to in terms of like how to run a business and how to be successful in metal. So yeah, it'll be cool.
I love talking to ass kickers, it's just that's my favorite thing on here. It's like, oh, cool. They're doing what they love. They're happy about it. They're proud. Let's go. So definitely the attitude and vibe that we love on the show. So shall we get into this tour?
Dude, let's bring on Justine.
Let's do it. Justine, welcome to She's with the Band. How's it going today?
Yeah, good, thank you. Just sort of chilling in Newcastle. We got there the day before our show tomorrow, so that's gonna be really cool.
Sweet. So yeah, is it a full UK tour at the moment?
UK and Europe. So we did Ireland last couple of days, Belfast and Dublin. And then yeah, tomorrow we're doing Newcastle and the rest of the UK, and we're going to Europe, I think, in a week and a half.
Awesome. You had kind of mentioned to us before we hit record that your plan is to just explore Newcastle today. So, is there anywhere that you just always have to hit up, whether a certain restaurant or thrifting? Like, is there a go-to for you when you have a free day? Because I know it's a rarity.
Literally just try and like hit up record shops really. Um, and yeah, like just try and like walk around. We kind of like looking at buildings. Like David, our guitarist, is really into history, so I kind of tag along with him a lot because he sort of like talks about all the buildings and stuff. So I'm quite happy just to sort of yeah walk about really.
Oh, that's awesome. I feel like if you ever toured around Florida, you'd be super disappointed at the lack of history. Like it's just, hey, this building was built in 2012. You know, so I'm sure the UK is a completely different energy as far as that goes.
Oh yeah, like everything's super old. Like there's stuff in like Dublin that were like from the 1700s that was so old that like the foundations had started shifting, and it's very cool.
Yeah,
But
that's
yeah,
amazing.
that's cool.
Well,
You
I
guys
know
make up
that
for it in food though, right?
we
That we
do. I
do.
mean, we have large quantities of
All the
food. We have large
burgers.
quantities of history.
I'll never
There you
forget
go.
going to the States for like the first time with my family as a kid and just realizing, oh my gosh, the portions are like 4 times the size of what we get here in Canada. It blew my mind. And then going to the UK for the first time, just being absolutely infatuated with the architecture. So both points here I've experienced and both are true.
We needed you to validate. So
Amazing.
thank you, Alicia.
Of course, of
Yeah,
course.
no
I'm an
worries.
expert, clearly.
Yeah. Well, of course, like having time off and having time to explore around the city is of utmost value. And I know that, you know, I was looking at just a few interviews about the recording process for Conquering, and I know that a similar situation was really valuable when it came to recording that album, that you had a lot more time on your hands thanks to the pandemic. For at least the one decent thing that came out of it was the amount of time that you had during the creative process. So I know that like as people's attention spans get shorter and shorter, it's like boom, boom, boom. We need album, we need tour, keep going, keep hustling. So having a little bit more time with Conquering, how does that like change your perception of the like workload that bands are under at the moment?
I think there's definitely a bit more pressure to sort of make up for lost time, but I feel like uh not just myself, but like everyone else I've spoken to, they've kind of gotten over that. Like last year, everyone was like, I am exhausted. I've played so many festivals, I've attended so many shows because you're like in your head, I've got to make up for 2 years lost. Um, but I feel like that's kind of dying down. And people are just sort of accepting the fact that the pandemic has affected a lot of stuff for bands. But yeah, like I mean, I feel like it's very positive now. I mean, like this is like the first year that Touchwood hasn't been affected by COVID, so I'm hoping it's plain sailing, apart from cost of living crisis. But who cares? Let's ignore that.
Ignore it till we can't. But
I
yeah,
Yeah,
know.
no,
exactly.
absolutely. Well, I know at least you all are keeping busy, which I'm sure distracts you from that scenario a little bit, maybe.
Hopefully.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, like people always need entertainment, right? So yeah,
Yeah, I
Well,
suppose
it'd
that's
be
the one thing
boring.
we took out of it was like the necessity for music, especially when times get difficult. So we're thankful for you.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. I'm glad to be indulged.
One of the things I really wanted to dive into with you today, especially because I remember interviewing both you and Sammy like a year and a half ago, and it was so much fun kind of getting that behind the scenes of the band. And I really think that your story is an interesting one because you guys were dating since you were 16. Then one day he, of course, started writing for a project called Employed to Serve and just needed a vocalist. He said, why don't you give it a go? Just point blank asking out of nowhere. And it really didn't occur to you of being a vocalist because it's something you hadn't tried before you gave it a go. And of course, now we are here. So prior to that moment, had you really done much singing prior to that? Because of course you were in many other bands previously, but just even the general things like singing in the shower, in the car, like was that something that was also a passion of yours?
Yeah, I reckon so. Like, it's always just something I've like enjoyed doing, and I've always been such a huge fan of music. I've always like growing up, always loved being the center of attention as well. Like my mum always says. So So yeah, like always just like entertaining and just sort of, you know, being weird. So I think it kind of goes in quite well, being a vocalist, I guess. It's almost like something my family wasn't that surprised that I got into.
I'd really
Yeah.
love to know some of those things you did as a kid, because you said just like random things being entertaining, being really out there. Was it just like dancing to steal the attention, being super loud? What kind of energy were you giving?
Just a lot of hyperactivity, really. So when I was really young, I used to jump off of things and go, catch me. So I was stage diving from a young age. My poor nan, she used to have like a cup of tea, and I used to be when I was like I was little, I wasn't like this thing because that'd be horrible. I'll crush my poor nan. She's only 4'11". But but yeah, like just sort of just being hyperactive and just sort of running about a lot and being really into like fast music and yeah, kind of
It
like I
sounds
am
like you
now, but
were
I'm a bit more.
it sounds like you
Sorry.
were stage diving from an early age, essentially. Like
Yes,
telling
it's just
people to
Yes.
catch
great.
me and jumping off of things. Like you were just
Yeah.
practicing for where you are now.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it's nice that I've got something to put my energy into, I guess. That's a bit more positive than jumping on people. But
Then
when the time
jumping on your
arises, I
nan.
do, yeah. I don't do that anymore, luckily for her.
And you know, I like how Alicia you brought up like kind of the throwback to when you were younger, Justine, and something that I thought was really cool was the Exist music video because it showed like a young girl with like the figurines of everybody and employed to serve and just like envisioning what it was like at one of your shows. So I'd love to know if you were ever in that position, if there were certain artists that you really idolized and fantasized about seeing one day, and also alongside that, if you've been able to cross paths with any of them now that you're a touring musician.
Yeah, so I mean the concept of the music video is basically like what I kind of came up with because I liked the idea of sort of capturing that sort of youthful wonder about like discovering your favorite thing for the first time, whether it's sports, music, like film, like whatever you're into really, and that's sort of like trying to sort of like communicate like how special that is and how you're your own little world. Because everyone must have had that when they were a kid, like finding that one toy or thing that they like kind of really like it really resonated with them and found like their hobby for the first time. So that's kind of what we wanted to do with that music video. And then like in terms of bands that growing up with that I've met, I guess I'm trying to think. Matt from Funeral for a Friend's a huge one for me. So we toured with them on our first EP, which is incredible. And I sort of still talk to him now, like for like band stuff. Matt Heafy from Trivium. There's a lot of Matts actually. I realized this. And yeah, and like hanging out with Gajira is a big thing as well because I mean I've been listening to them since I was like 14. So yeah, that's another huge one for me. So getting to see them every night's like incredible.
That must
Yeah.
just kind of feel like that constant daydream, you know, like when you are out on the road with a band that you love so much, because not only is it an incredible concert night after night, but you actually get to form these friendships to the side. So has that in itself been kind of
Yeah.
just a very surreal experience for you?
Yeah, it's mad, like because you kind of obviously forget they're real people because you just kind of like also there's this weird thing where because you kind of followed like bands music for so long and like read interviews, you feel like you know them but you kind of don't. So that's
Mhm.
kind of funny in a way. You have to like not be weird um and be like, oh, this is your favorite color.
Yeah, no,
But yeah.
it's so funny you mentioned that because I remember like the first time I crossed paths with someone like Pierce the Veil, who I loved in high school. I knew so much about the band. I knew so much about every member, but I was meeting them on like a friend level because we were touring together and whatnot. And there were so many moments where they would say, "Oh, my favorite band is so and so." Like it's so crazy that I get to hang out with them. And I would just look like, yeah, it's so crazy to
It's like,
hang
I
out
would
with
have
your favorite
never known
band.
that.
Just little things where you just have to, you know, play it cool, I suppose. But it's cool
Yeah,
that like being
absolutely.
able to transfer that relationship now into a peer level with Gojira especially is amazing.
Yeah, and
And
I think sorry.
no, go on.
I was just saying that the thing that was like cool about it is that because you're sort of into their music, you're sort of by default into the same music they are. So that's quite nice in itself. They like 9 times out of 10, they tend to be into the same sort of interests because a lot of people get into metal through the same way, whether it's like
Mhm.
through playing like video games, like Tony Hawk Pro Skater, like Grand Theft Auto, that kind of stuff. Like, so you kind of end up like forging like really good friendships with other band members, just because of that.
Right.
Yeah. Has there been any music between you and like Gojira on this tour or anything like that that you've shared that you've been like, wow, this is definitely common ground? Like even any new music that you've discovered that you'd want to share or old?
I'm trying to think really. We haven't actually discussed music too much, to be honest, which is surprising. But I know they're sort of like quite tapped into the sort of UK scene. Like they took our friends related to Massey on tour, and a band called Black Peaks as well. So yeah, that's been really cool. So yeah, and Car Bomb as well. So like they're kind of like into sort of very much like the sort of same bands, and we were sort of acquaintances of a lot of them as well. So
Awesome.
that's nice.
You had mentioned the scene over there and how you really do feel like the scene in England is really good because it tries to be super inclusive and just encourage people, no matter the background, no matter where they come from, to just finally dive into this insane industry that we all chose to be in. And of course, being a podcast that focuses so much on wanting to just empower people who are listening. You've shared before too how you feel like more girls are finally growing up and seeing women in bands, so it makes it way less daunting to want to start your own. So what kind of advice do you feel like you'd share with younger women who have these aspirations of joining this heavy metal community? Because at first it's daunting and it's scary and it's a totally different world that people, are subjected to so many different things. So just advice to put out there for anyone who is listening right now.
I think you just sort of start getting involved. Like you don't have to, like, so if you kind of don't know where to start, I think turning up at your local shows and just sort of being a known presence there is like such a huge thing. Because I know like so many bands coming up who don't go to shows and don't make friends with other bands, like, and it's just sort of like, oh, that's part of it, and that's part of the joy of it. Because I find, especially as you sort of get further along in your career, you'll have the ups and downs and everything, but it's really nice having mates who have started bands at the same time as you, and you get to see them succeed, and that kind of is a nice sort of like plus as well, because you get, it's just a nice feeling. Like it takes more than one band to sort of carry a scene. So it's just really important just to sort of get your like, get your people basically. I've made so many friends through being in a band. And I think that's like the biggest joy, is like next to performing, is like forging those relationships with people. And then it's not so daunting because you have like a whole crew with you. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think that's what attracts me to this music in the first place, because it's such a small world, right? Like 9 times out of 10, like your friend will know, some other people, and they're like, yeah, it'll be weird, like degrees of separation where you're like, oh no, I went to school with them, or etc.
Yeah, no, you really are actually such a good person to ask for advice in this spectrum, because aside from being an employed to serve, you also have a record label, Church Road Records. And I know that you really are hands-on with mentoring and managing the campaigns for the artists that you work with on the label. And that's cool to hear, because from an outside perspective, you think of these like high level labels and you're like, well, it's corrupt, they're controlling the artist, greedy, this and that. But I'd love to hear a little more about the differences between those notorious record labels compared to a more hands-on experience like Church Road Records, and what you're doing with them.
I think like that it's not as evil as it used to be because there's less money in music now. So like I think there's like, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't still go on and things like that, especially I'm sure in like bigger levels like pop or whatever. But in terms of like independent labels, like it's such a different ball game. It's very much labor of love, and like it's a lot more DIY. Like I feel like we have like a lot closer relationships with all the bands in the roster because it's a smaller band, like smaller roster, and like you can kind of get to know them a bit more. Whereas I guess if you're on a major label, you have like a huge roster that's spread out all over the world that you might not necessarily get to know like personally. And like through that, like I find it easier to sort of help bands develop because you actually get to know them on a personal level and what they want to achieve, rather than just sort of a very transactional business relationship where it's just like, here's an album, we're going to press it, I'm going to put it in the shops, goodbye. Like there's a bit more artist development that we try to do, and especially with the size bands that we work with, because they're smaller and like more grassroots, so a lot of the time they don't have management, they don't have booking agents. We help build a team around them if they need it, and just sort of try and give advice really, because I mean ETS has been going for like a decade now. Literally just this year we've like turned 10 years old, so chances are like I've been in situations that they're having issues with, or can like offer some advice to hopefully help them sort of like achieve what they want to achieve, really.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's what's really cool is you do have a unique perspective being in a band. So it's like, well, of course you're credible to help these people because you do it yourself. You know, you're not just like some higher up who hasn't gotten your shoes dirty and been out there too.
Yeah, paid the dues and gone through all the BS that we know gets thrown your way early on. So happy 10-year anniversary, by the way.
Thank you. I can't believe it's been that long. It's one of those, it feels like it could be 10 years, but equally like when you say a decade, that feels like a huge amount of time. It's like, wow, it's most of my adult life. You know, I just turned 31 recently. So yeah, since I was 21. Wow. So yeah. So I grew up being in a band, basically. Well, I'm still growing up, hopefully, but you know.
Yeah, 31's a new 21.
Yeah. Oops, sorry.
There you are.
You go back.
You're good.
I guess just speaking on that, how dare they?
I know. They probably forgot where the trailer keys or something, I'm sure.
I think when it comes to anniversaries like that, especially something that's so substantial, like a full decade going by, I always love reflecting on those first moments or just kind of those first memories that you have in terms of building this entire brand, the camaraderie, the community that you've mentioned. So if we were to go back to a decade ago, like what are those first nostalgic memories that come to mind of Employed to Serve?
It was just really little ones, like getting played on the radio, playing our first show, getting our EP pressed on vinyl. It was just sort of very humble goals at the time, or getting covered in a magazine. So like it's quite funny how like things change, and it's quite nice because I try to remember remind myself where I sort of came from in those kind of goals and be like, oh, actually, like I've set out everything that I wanted to achieve with this band. So like it makes me put less pressure on myself a lot of the time, which is quite nice because it makes me like kind of take a step back. And yeah, like I'm a lot calmer with it now because I remember during the pandemic I used to be like, oh, we should be doing more, and as I'm sure everyone did, because you couldn't literally do anything. So yeah, now I feel like a lot more chill about it and just a bit more accepting of like you won't get every festival, you won't get number one and stuff like that, and like that's okay. There's like different sort of sliding scales, and I think like my idea of success has like really changed. For me, like when I was younger, it was very much like, oh, like, you know, I want to sell X amount of albums or anything like that. But for me at the moment, it's just continually like creating things, whether it's through the label or the band, for like things that I'm proud of, or just enjoying myself. Because I think as you like see how fast time goes, it makes you realize how short life is. Like as lame as that sounds.
No.
And that made me realize it during the pandemic as well, because obviously those people like, you know, sadly passed away. And so during that, I was like, you know what, like I'm just gonna have fun because this is important.
Yeah. Are there certain sorry, Alicia.
No, please go ahead.
Are there certain aspects of the job that are bringing you the most joy right now, like certain parts of your day when you're on tour, or certain aspects of working on the music? Like what is it for you now that you're finding the most fulfilling?
I think on ETS's level, I love talking to people who our music's connected with. That's really nice. Because a lot of our lyric content is super personal to myself and Sammy. So that's a huge thing for me. And also just seeing people's grins when like there's a breakdown. There's something like so satisfying, like watching people like pull a stink face as a breakdown comes in. So I love that at the minute. And in terms of the label, I just think how I get excited texts from the bands we're working on when they're like, yo, we just got played on Radio 1. Or like we just sent them the vinyl for the first time. They're like, wow, this is amazing. Like my mum's going to be stoked. And that's just really nice.
I just love that. I love that life perspective because I feel like it's very important. Because I remember when I first started interviewing and hosting like almost a decade ago, when I first started doing this, the whole thing was I want to earn this amount. I want to host at these events. I want to work with these brands. And so much of that has changed because of course, over time, these accolades do come true into fruition. But at the same time, I've just realized I just want to do what makes me happy. And I don't care if that's every day, like just talking about music or wrestling or this or that, like whatever you do, as long as it's bringing you that joy and making you feel that pride, I'm so with it. So I'm so glad that you have that same similar philosophy because I know all three of us definitely share that at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'll still get a bit like grumpy when our monthly listeners drop down. And do you know what I mean? Like,
Oh, I feel you.
I still like kind
Oh,
of
don't
have to
worry,
catch
we feel
myself.
that.
Like, you are just sort of like, yeah, I mean, human at the end of the day. But yeah, like, it's just nice to sort of remind, because the thing is, like, the goalposts always change. Like, I remember when I was like, oh, I just want to play in front of 50 people. And now I'm like, oh, but we're not playing in front of 5,000 people yet. And I'm like, but if you don't enjoy yourself now, you'll probably never enjoy yourself. So you might as well just find the joy in any situation. But yeah, sorry, I sound really lame.
No, it's such a valuable reminder, and literally something I was thinking about yesterday, because, you know, Alicia and I are always talking about ideas for the podcast, things we want to do next. And I'm like, we have a podcast, just chill and enjoy it for 2 seconds.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
Yeah,
exactly what we said, goalpost always changes.
Yeah, and you don't have to concentrate on constantly getting bigger, but I think that's something so kind of so like much due to the fact like social media, and like it's such an easy thing to compare yourself to. Like, it's such an old conversation now because social media's been around for like what, 10 plus years, but it is true, because you kind of end up comparing yourself to like other people and what they've achieved rather than your past achievements and how you've grown. And yeah, like, you know, it kind of makes you feel inadequate because you've got less followers, and it's like so easy to get caught in it. So like, I totally understand how it all happens.
Well, serendipitously, before this interview, I did see a tweet from Kerrang saying, literally, it was like an interview with you saying, "Employed to Serve is the best metal band in the UK." So, you know, we should just take a moment and be like, you're at the top of your game. It's all good.
Thank you.
Yeah. Just so strange that had come up just before talking to you, but yeah,
that's amazing.
It's just the algorithms. They know.
They're reading my
They're
brain,
always
dude.
listening.
They know your emails. They knew we had this scheduled.
Yeah.
That's terrifying, but I kind of love it at the same time.
Right.
We were talking about some of your live shows and how you love the energy, or when a breakdown comes your way, you just see the faces change. And something that I always find so interesting, especially when we're speaking with female front women, is how people after your shows will come up to you and be like, oh my gosh, your voice is so high and you are so nice. And then the juxtaposition of, you seem so angry on stage. So of course, I'm assuming you will still get those kinds of comments, but does it ever bother you in that sense that people still will see these incredible females on stage and immediately expect that they don't scream or they can't scream on stage?
Not really, because I mean, just as long as I know it comes from a nice place, do you know what I mean? Like, I don't really, it doesn't really bother me, because people are like, if they don't know, or if they haven't literally listened to many like women in metal, like, it's not there. Like, it just doesn't really matter, to be honest, like, to me. But yeah, like, it doesn't bother me personally. I know it bothers some, but yeah, just as long as like, yeah, just as long as like it said, like I said, it's from a nice place, it doesn't really matter. I always get compared to that, I don't know if you've seen this meme, but the one where it's like Hermione Granger with the beast. No, sorry, that's Sabrina with the Baphomet. And it's like, was it like vocals on, like, off stage and vocals on stage? I've got tagged in that sometimes.
That is amazing. You know, there was something I read in another interview with you that I thought was such a refreshing perspective, where you had said, like, they asked you, oh, do you feel the pressure of being this or looking like that or sounding like this as a woman in music? Because I mean, that's something we just come across so often, being a female focused podcast, is like certain expectations, certain things. And you were like, well, I don't feel it unless you let it. You know what I mean? So I appreciate that you have a good way of like moderating what people say, like in your mind. It's true. Like, if you don't take it to heart, like, it's fine, just is.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, yeah, obviously there's always room for improvement and everything, but I think just as long as you kind of like project like, you know, positivity and things, I think things will just eventually change. You know, and equally, not saying that you should just like not let it bother you, because if something does bother you, of course you have to speak out about it, but yeah,
balanced perspective. I respect that.
Always.
Well, I don't know about you, Alicia, but I think it might be time for our lightning round. What do you say?
I can't wait. I'm so ready for this. I can't wait to see what Justine's going to answer here. Would you like to kick it off, or shall I?
I got it, dude. Well, Justine, we do have a series of questions that we ask at the end of every interview of some of your most jaw-dropping experiences throughout your career. So starting it off, what is the most jaw-dropping experience you've ever had at a show? Could be one you've played or one you've just been to as a fan.
Oh, jaw dropping. I'm trying to think now. I'll tell you what, it's non-metal related. I went to go see Kendrick Lamar at the O2, and it was like the most phenomenal thing I've ever seen. Like it was like a stage show. So that was I had like my mouth open the whole set, so I guess that would count as jaw dropping.
Quite literally.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
literally.
I did notice you have a very mixed music taste as well. Like I saw something about Destiny's Child and now Kendrick Lamar. So you're not just a metalhead.
No, not at all. Like, well, I'm like a music fan basically. Like I grew up on all sorts of different music. Like it's like my hobby as well. So I don't like the way I sort of see it is that I can't really listen to 8 hours of the same genre every day because I literally play music whilst I'm working and just about doing anything really. So it's just fun. I like digging deep.
Yeah, we're all in the same boat.
Yes.
Speaking to digging deep, we might be heading that way with this next question. So the most jaw-dropping misstep early in your career and the lesson that you learned from it.
Misstep. I'm trying to think. I think like, I don't know, I guess like when I've not had a good set, being too hard on myself. Because I know a lot of like musicians really struggle with that. Like they end up spiraling and they're like, can I even do it anymore? Like because they fluffed like one part of the song. So that was something I've literally been like really bad at until even pre-pandemic. So I've done a lot of work of being like, no, like, you know, you've rehearsed, you're human, it's fine. And it's also helped that I've seen videos of like James Hetfield do a bum note, like in a fucking like stadium. So like you just like
we're all right.
It's quite it makes me like him more because I know he's human. So I'm like, well, yeah, give yourself grace. So I guess it's that one really, because that's been something I've like been struggling with for years really. Spiraling after a bad set.
Well, if you ever need to be like humbled once again, there's that infamous video of Motley Crue. That's a good one too. You want to be like, well, if they got it and they have their moments, it's all good. Anyways,
yeah,
that
exactly.
one. It just makes me laugh, that video. But I love Motley Crue, no shade. Anyways, the next question here is the most jaw-dropping female artist that you would love to work with.
Oh, can it be like completely like won't happen?
Of course.
You never know what'll happen. So
because anything could happen.
I'm a huge Bjork fan. So Bjork, like working with someone like Bjork or Beyonce, my two queen bees.
I love that.
I think one day Beyonce does need to be on a metal song. So why not employ to search?
Oh yeah,
you know.
I reckon so. She's got such a strong voice. I reckon it'll work well.
And then for our last one, the most jaw-dropping misconception about yourself that you wish people understood.
I'm not as cool as I look. I hate to break it to you. I'm I'm kidding, by the way. I don't know really. I don't think like I'm famous enough to have a big misconception. Do you know what I mean? Like there's not like enough data, if that makes sense, to like know that everyone thinks this about me. So I don't know.
Yeah,
I guess.
I mean, have you ever received any kind of off the wall comments on Instagram or Twitter? I mean, it happens where you're just like, this is just so not true or just so not correct. Does that ever happen on your page or the band's page?
I guess it is going back to sort of being quite aggressive on stage, but I feel like quite approachable off stage. So I guess that's quite an easy misconception. That definitely happens with our guitarist Sammy as well, because he always screams his head off and then he's like, hello, and he comes off stage. So
it really is true that the metalheads tend to be the nicest. Like I really come to learn that the heaviest bands are just the least heavy off stage.
The biggest teddy bears. I love that.
I suppose you get all your aggression and energy off on stage. So I guess that could be it.
Yeah.
It's like an exercise.
True. Well, thank you so much, Justine. It's been so great getting to talk to you, especially, at the height of your career, as we say. I appreciate you making time in your busy schedule and
Thank you
enjoy
very
your
much.
off day now. You have
Yes.
time
Talking
to
about being
explore.
humbled, I'm in the junk room at the height of my career, so there we go. It's the only it's the room in the bus that's free.
Oh, well, it's been so great, and
Thank you so
enjoy the
much.
junk room, I guess.
Oh yeah, it's cozy in here. There's plenty of laptops to play on, so it's perfect.
There you go. And
Thank you for having
everybody,
me.
of course, everyone watching, if you want more of She's with the Band, stay tuned here on Knotfest every Wednesday. You can subscribe, make sure you're subscribed on streaming platforms if you're listening on audio. I've been Tori Kravitz on behalf of my co-host Alicia Atout, the wonderful, the fabulous. We'll see you next week. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.